So the way that we've ended up sat in the same room together is that about a month and a half ago, I found that Basingstoke had a camera club, maybe a little bit over a month and a half, maybe a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that Basingstoke had a camera club. I mean, it's probably obvious that they would have a camera club.
Every town's got a camera club.
Exactly. But I figured that after many years of having an extreme bias against camera clubs, for many reasons, mostly to do with the way my mum was treated at one. Yeah. I thought I'd give it a go. I'm new to the area. It would be good to meet some new photographers. And with generally a pretty big goal of improving some sides of photography that I'm absolutely terrible with. Yeah. And I've certainly seen some elements of things I've been told about in the past about camera clubs. I've seen, with regard to, there's obviously going to be clicks, because anytime you get people that go to something week in, week out, there's going to be cliques of people, and then the new people kind of have to filter in and find their way in. But what's your official title role within Basingstoke Camera Club?
Right. So my title is publicity officer.
Right.
I think I was explaining to you yesterday about how I sort of got myself into this. It was the last meeting of last season. There was a place came up. There was the guy that actually ran the publicity officer role. Had been doing it for the last 8 years. Wanted to give it up, but nobody would stand up. And I sort of like everybody stepped one pace forward. And I
so publicity officer is like social media?
Yeah. So I didn't even know what it was at the time, but somebody said, yeah, you'd be good at this. I think you've used Facebook before. And I said, well, probably, yeah. So I said, yeah, I'd do it.
Right.
So I suppose my generic role is to publicise the club. Obviously try and make sure that the local community know what we do, and also encourage new members to come along. And also, which I didn't know when I took it on, one of the major roles is we do an annual members exhibition at the library, the Basingstoke Library, or Discovery Centre as it's known now.
So an exhibition for members' work?
Yes, members' work. And they hold that for 2 weeks, first 2 weeks of September. One, to obviously showcase the work that we do, but also to maybe encourage new members come along, because our season runs from September through to May. So if we're going to pick any new members up, that's a good time to do it so they can join in, etc. I'm
going to end up asking quite a few stupid questions, if that's okay, because it's all entirely new to me, and I'm probably, as much as anything, using this as a way of finding out about camera clubs. Why is it in seasons? Why is it not just a rolling...
Yeah, sorry. When I say season, we actually meet all year round, effectively. Okay. But what we do is we have, if you like, a formal evening once a week through from September to end of May.
Yep.
And then we close down for the summer. But during the summer, we run more a sort of social, informal get-together on a Thursday evening. We'll go out. We'll pick a place to go, whether it's over to Kingsclear or whatever, where there might be something interesting to take photos of. Go out, arrive there sort of 6:30.
So is that down to seasons essentially, as in, because winter's obviously darker a lot earlier?
Yeah,
the formal meetings make more sense than wasting summer evenings.
Yeah, exactly. So although there's no formal meeting during the summer, we do have this sort of more informal thing where you can go out, meet with the people, take some photos, and we normally end up, go to a pub afterwards and have a drink before we head off home. But making the most of the summer light.
One of the things I was sort of thinking about in preparation for doing this, because the plan is I'd like to do three podcasts with people from the Camera Club,
right?
With yourself, with the president and president-elect, if I can get them, which I don't know if I'll be able to, but also with a couple of new members, just to kind of see like expectations and sort of input from all angles, because to me it's just an interesting subject. But one of the things that I didn't think to ask, and it only really occurred to me this morning, from the Camera Club's point of view, what do you think the point of a camera club is? Is it a revenue thing? Because I can't imagine it's making an absolutely extortionate amount of money.
Okay. So I'm going to answer this from a personal point of view because I can't represent the camera club.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
in that respect. So what is it? So from my personal point of view, it's a way of meeting like-minded people and from what I want to get out of it is potentially improve or expanding my photography or scope of photography.
Right.
It's not a revenue making thing. You know,
right.
We run. I mean, again, from my personal experience, the camera club is run as a sort of non-profit making organisation.
Right.
One of the things we do, I don't know if you know, is that a couple of guys run a national competition.
Right.
Where half the profits from that go to the local hospice. So,
okay.
And that's
St. Michael's?
Yeah, that's right. And they've been doing this for a number of years because we just did a bit of a publicity thing when the beginning of the season. I think they've raised it's just over £10,000.
Right.
Local hospice. So, it's just a matter of any revenue that comes into the club is then fed back into the club itself. So whether that be buying new equipment or, obviously this costs associated with funding the club is insurance, there's, hiring the hall, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a non-profit making organisation effectively. Yeah. So it's a community thing as well. I think that's the second thing is it does give the ability to, if people want to use it as a social organisation as well. You know?
I think that's something that maybe I had not given much consideration to. The way I had viewed a camera club from a very external point of view was that it was competition based, and that was kind of its entire purpose, was that it was for people to get together and to have a competition. Something that I've said from the outset, I've not really ever understood the purpose of competition in creativity, unless it's competition with yourself. That's a personal thing for me. But I think the problem there is on me, that I've misinterpreted. I've used the wrong definition of the word competition.
Yeah, I think it's there's a number of things. Obviously, some people like to do competitions, and there's loads and loads of ways of doing that within the amateur photography organisation. I mean, you don't have to do that through a camera club. There's national competitions if you're really into it, and you obviously have to pay to do that and stick a photo, and you don't have to be a professional photographer to do that.
Right.
But from my perspective, it's more to do with using it for creative, sort of constructive criticism of your photography, and also an ability to improve it, whether you're improving it the right way or wrong way, because all photography is art, so it's subjective rather than objective. So whether you think that a judge has said, oh, you should have done it this way and you've done it another way, so you do your next photo the next way, the next judge will come in and say, no,
you should have done it that way. So you could put the same photo in front of 3 judges and get a completely different reaction.
But I think, I've been with the club for 2 years, and I think it's helped my creative side in terms of what I've learned in terms of certainly things like composition, subject matter, that sort of thing.
So when you were entering for the club's competitions, are you shooting for the competition? Are you going out with a view to enter something, or do you just go through like a back catalogue of stuff that you've done?
When I first joined, obviously went through a back catalogue. You get to a stage where what are you going to do? So you want to try and get a good score, or do well in the competition, whether it's a first, second, or whether they're going to score it in terms of points.
Right.
So you look at your photo and say, oh, that's a really good one. But after a while, obviously you're going to start to skim through to the bottom of the pile. You're not careful.
Yeah.
So and that's another thing is it encourages you to go out and take photographs.
Yes.
Because you've got to keep, if you want to continue in that vein of entering competitions, you've got to have a pretty good throughput of photographs, unless you're going to shove the same one in every year.
Or just like a very minor variation on one you've entered before.
Yeah. I do. One of the things you have to be a little bit careful about, and my wife really annoys my wife, is that I will go out and potentially at one time I would take a photograph, and now I won't take a photograph because I don't think it's going to be good enough.
Right.
The light's not good enough. That's what she always says. Oh, the bloody light's not good enough, or whatever. Composition's not right.
Yeah.
So you have to be a little bit careful that you're not just taking photographs because it's going to be a high value mark or a high value position in a composition.
Well, so obviously last night I entered my first ever like round. It's like a league, I think it's referred to. I entered the first round. I entered 2 images in. There seemed to be there's a few comments asked of me for entering the B league. So there's 2 leagues, there's A and B, and I entered in B. And the reason, I'll make this like a thing, but the reason that I entered B was because firstly, I'm a new member, and I think it would take a fairly arrogant person to walk in and be like, yeah, I'm an A. My own personal opinion there. And secondly, the first week that I came to where there was judging, everybody was in the A league, and the B league was like a quarter of the people that were in the A. So I thought, well, at least I'm filling out the first half of the judging. What I did was I've entered one of my portraits. It's one of my favorite portraits I've ever taken. But I knew there were faults. But it's one of those things, especially I think if you do a lot of the same genre, you become very attached to certain images. Yeah. And it was good to kind of dip my toe in the water with how portraits are interpreted by judges. Yeah. Because not many people seem to enter portraits. And the ones that they do are very different from the style that I do. Yeah. So I was curious. Basically, that one was just litmus paper. I just wanted to see what kind of came back. Yeah. And the other image I entered was a snapshot from Bruges taken last week. Yeah. And everything that was said in critique of the images, I'd actually agree with. I think it depends on how much you really put value into something being an issue. One of the purposes of a judge or any critique, and I've done plenty of critiquing of other people's work when I've been asked to, is you're looking for fault. Yeah, rather than just taking something as a passive. Yeah,
I was going to ask you what you thought of because I obviously when we went, it was funny because we spoken before the meeting. And you said, I'm entering a portrait and one from Bruges, and I thought, I obviously realised the one from Bruges and the portrait one. So I was interested to think what you thought of.
Well, I'll tell you, critique. As far as the critique goes, so to break down, the critique was a black and white portrait of an actor called Max, and it's like the first image on my website. It's the first image in my portfolio at the moment because I just have a very good attachment to that image. And the critique was the crop being too broad of a crop. That it was funny. He said that I must have been attracted to his muscles. Which I think he tried to make that was quite funny. I did have a bit of a laugh at that. And that there wasn't a lot of interest in the bottom half of the photo. He was wearing a black t-shirt, and there wasn't a lot of interest. What I tend to do when it comes to critique is when I'm giving it is I'll try and think, well, okay, but what's the sort of inverse of my problem? So let's say I take the bottom half of that image and I fill it with, HDR the t-shirt up so that you can see all of the I don't think that would be particularly helpful. Having something on the t-shirt or him be wearing something that's got more of a distraction to it, I think that would be the problem. It would then be distracting. Yeah. And I didn't think that with the intensity of the expression, it required a tight crop. Yeah. So that would be my answer to the criticisms, but I don't have a problem with the criticisms. I think they were all valid.
I thought that there was a point that, because he was obviously, and the judge said he was a muscular guy, and he had his arm forward, which was obviously again accentuating his physique. Yeah. Now, if you cropped it in, you'd lose. You presumably would have lost his arm. Out of that anyway. So you'd be just relying on.
Well, the definition on his arm is actually all truth be told, so that was shot in my living room in Littlehampton about 2 years ago. And the definition on his arms is actually an unintended consequence of how you can move someone in front of a camera where they feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Although he's an actor, he's used to there being 50, 60, 100 people being in a room.
Yeah.
It was me and him.
Right.
And there was a little bit of...
Yeah.
He's one of these people that when he's... I've worked with him a few times now, and he's one of these people that when he's nervous, he starts to show off.
Right.
And I had to give him something to do to like hold him. So I had him sit very far back on the stool and then put his arms down, basically between his legs holding the stool. And it put his weight forward and it put a lot of definition in his jaw.
Right.
That was essentially it.
Yeah.
But I just liked the crop. One thing that did surprise me was I spoke to the judge afterwards at the end of the thing, and I said thanks. It was like my first time being critiqued at a camera club, and he asked me which images, and I said, and he said, yeah. So the difference between a good image and a great image is light,
right?
And I completely agree, but I felt that light wasn't the problem with either image. Yeah. I don't think my Bruges image had the issue of light because the point of the image was to show to me it was a stormy medieval shot.
Yeah.
I think with bright sunshine in it, it would have just been a middle of the day photo.
Yeah.
But again, it's a valid criticism if you want to see something done a different way.
Yeah. Because he said about the Bruges image, he said that he liked the composition and the fact that you got this sort of leading diagonal and you got the tower, the vertical, the tower. And I think it comes down to landscape photography. He said it's about the light, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely true. He probably isn't the most interesting image.
Yeah. But unless you're going to sit there for the next 3 weeks and wait for the light to change what you're going to do,
Yeah, and I think it's the first time I've had the feeling where I've heard like a criticism level towards my image that was then a bonus for another image. And I can understand sort of now from firsthand experience where you sort of think there's a lack of consistency in the sense of, okay, but like my image was bad because it should have had this really stark light, but this image is good because it didn't have this really stark light.
Yeah.
So I can understand where people come in and they're like, well, where's the consistency? But for me, it was more about, I'm curious to hear someone externalize how they feel about an image, their initial impact of an image. Because unfortunately, especially like my generation is, everything's awesome and amazing and wonderful and fantastic, or you should kill yourself. Those are the only two options. You don't ever get given anything particularly constructive. So either someone's kissing your ass or they're literally trying to get you to kill yourself through cyberbullying. Those are your options. So it's nice to have the feedback. I had like 3 people come up and talk to me at the halfway point and sort of seemed to be quite irritated that the score was what it was. And I just don't, I don't know, maybe it's just me, I haven't got used to it yet, but I just don't take it particularly seriously.
Yeah, I think the trouble is if you take it too seriously, you shouldn't be doing it because you say you can go there, you can get a fantastic score and then the next time you get a rubbish score and you think, why? But don't go home and sort of like dwell on it. Just move on, But
I think it's just how you use it. The criticism's there and you can dismiss it if the person's missed the point that you think you made with the photo, or you can think, well, I thought this photo gave this impression, but clearly it's completely missed the mark because that's not this person's initial impact.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the other thing is it may be that a particular judge is more inclined to a particular genre of photography.
Well, this is what I was going to ask you.
Maybe he's a bit switched off by something else.
So you've done this a bit longer now. You've been with that club for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Do you find that there's like a more prominent genre that people are like rated higher for, or that more people do?
No, I don't think there is. But as I say, I think it does. And again, it is the subjective thing of this is that a judge may like a particular image or a particular genre more than another one. That, again, my view. I'm no way am I a judge, and I think they have a pretty hard job. And that guy last night had, what was it? We were saying 102
images,
photos to go through in 2 hours, which is like it's a lot to
I'll give him a lot of credit because we started the second half about 10 minutes later than I think we wanted to.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm like, when not what he said, but essentially he was like, we're cutting the shit. I'm getting through this.
Yeah.
And I thought everything he gave was fairly concise and he moved it quite quickly. Yeah. Which like the last thing that I'd come to was the print judging. And I really felt like that guy dragged his feet on every image.
Yeah. I think again, in that guy's defense, I think he got to the stage where that was the trouble with the print stuff as well was there's a much bigger difference between the A and the B leagues in terms of the numbers that go in.
Right.
So he'd spent quite a lot of time on the B league ones.
Yeah.
And I think he felt like he had to sort of try and do the same with the A leagues ones. And then you suddenly get into, bloody hell, we've got another 50 photos.
Yeah, there was a point where he was like, how many's left? And they were like 47. And he was like, oh.
And I don't know whether then he felt, well, I can't, those last 20 photos, I can't say, is score, because I've given all the others the benefit of my judging experience of critique. I better do the same, and he stuck to it. Give him his due. But, and I think it was about 10:30 by the time he finished that one. But
I skipped that at like 9:45 because I was getting so tired.
But that's not usually what happens.
No, and I think like you were saying yesterday about the club's almost a victim of its own success at the moment with the sheer number of people entering things. Yeah. So you're going to have, when I look at the last two meetings that there were, one was members talking about like their milestones in photography, and about 40% of the people that turned up last night turned up for that. So obviously the competitions is something that people really want to attend, and so you're gonna have stuff run late. Yeah, if that's what most people are focused on.
Yeah.
So when it comes to yourself and like your history in photography, just give us what's your story with photography?
Right. Okay. So I started in photography. I was thinking I was 11. My parents bought me my first camera when I was 11,
right?
Which was a Polaroid camera, these old mechanical ones where you take the picture and you pull the sheet out, wait 3 minutes, ones. And then peel back. And
that's all the rage now.
You're lucky something's turned out, which was great, and I loved it for a year or two. It was good fun, but it wasn't sort of thing you could do much with.
Right.
But
had you shown an interest, or was it like, here's a camera, do you like it?
I don't think I had. I think it was just my parents decided that maybe for my birthday I'd like a camera.
Right.
So they bought me a camera. So, and I did take lots of, just again, recording shots effectively.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy it. But I wanted to do proper photography then, if you say proper photography. So I wanted a film camera. So I got a Zenith B, which is one of these old Russian mechanical cameras back in the day.
Bit of radioactivity going on.
Yeah, well, it was like
good stuff.
It was like built like a tank. It was, but it was it was a good way of getting into film photography. I joined the camera club at school.
Right.
For what that was worth. They had a dark room in the physics lab, and so I learned how to develop print black and white film, take images, and then I sort of kept that interest up until I probably went to uni. When I went to uni, I still was using my camera. Shared a house with a guy who was into photography as well, so we used to go off. We were in London, so we did go off and take photographs, etc. So kept it, and then I started work, got married, had kids, and I think, as happens with a lot of amateur photographers around that time, the camera goes in the drawer and it comes out at kids' birthdays, or you take it on holiday and you take your pictures. And
is that down to the sort of the time intensity?
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously other priorities on life at the time. Yeah. I think it just sort of like it goes to the background. You just don't have the time, I suppose. Yeah. So. So that I continued on that vein. I've got thousands of photographs of the kids. I still took a lot of photographs, but if I look at my photos between my sort of 20s to my 50s, they are pictures of the kids, and they're pictures taken at a holiday event. I never went out and said, well, I'm going to do some street photography, or I'm going to go out and specifically do some wildlife photography. Nothing like that. And then 3 years ago, I took voluntary redundancy from my work. I worked in the IT business, so lucky enough to have a decent pension, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I got a decent payoff, so it would keep me going until I needed to take my pension. So I finished work then and decided I had a lot more time than I had before. So maybe I should sort of resurrect this hobby that I had of photography.
Yeah.
So dusted off the camera. I had a digital camera by now, so wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it.
Yeah.
So, I assumed that from looking at my pictures of when I went on holiday, landscape photography was my thing. So I started watching YouTube videos, thinking, how can I improve on what I do, or what could I do?
Yeah.
And I watched a couple of guys. There's a couple of guys that I followed with Nigel Danson and Thomas Heaton, who are landscape photographers, and they are really, really good.
Yeah.
Well, in my opinion, they're really good.
Yeah.
And I used to think, that photograph is fantastic. I'd love to do that, but it just wasn't me. I'm not the sort of person that's gonna get up at like 2 o'clock in the morning and climb to the top of a mountain in the Lake District and wait for the sun to rise.
With Thomas Heaton, he has to get up like an hour earlier than that because he's got to do all the times he walks past the camera.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You've got to walk up the hill three or four times to get your drone.
I used to watch Thomas Heaton all the time.
Yeah.
Because landscape photography is something I really admire, but I'm like you, like sod getting up that early. It's just not my thing. And I used to watch his videos all the time. And I remember sat in the living room with YouTube on watching a Thomas Heaton video, and Jamila had come home from work and she's like, why does he keep setting up a camera and walking past it?
Yeah.
And now that's all I can see every time I watch his videos. So
he loves it, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think it's a common trope though, right?
Yeah.
Because you're showing the journey.
Yeah.
It's a narrative thing.
That's right, yeah. And he's got to get his drone out and show him walking up the hill and that sort of thing.
There's plenty of people like that. I mean, one that I follow very loosely is a guy called First Man Photography.
Oh yeah, I used to watch him as well. Yeah,
he's very prone to just randomly coming out with stuff, like videos. I think, what the fuck are you talking about? But that's half the fun of it.
Yeah.
But he does the same thing. I think it's a landscape photography thing. You have to show like the journey.
Yeah. So I sort of got okay. That's probably not what I'm going to do. So what do I do? Okay, so I don't do landscape, but maybe I do travel photography.
Yeah.
So what's travel photography? So I go on holiday and I take pictures.
Yeah. Sounds good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just good. But you still got I still find that you got the issue that, if you're going to do that sort of killer shot, you got to be there at the right time and the right time of day, the right time of year to be in the position to take a really good shot. Otherwise you take a postcard shot. So I've got loads of pictures. My son used to live in New Zealand, so we went over there a couple of times, and it's a amazing place.
Yep.
And we did a tour of the South Island, and some of the places we went to were incredible. But we got there at midday.
Yeah.
And you take this picture of this, this mountain vista in the background, this huge lake, and you think, that's brilliant, but it's all washed out because it's just the wrong time of day. But I'll tell to the coach driver to wait here till 7 o'clock at night, or wake me up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'll get that shot, but it don't happen.
Yeah.
So that sort of continued on for, I suppose, a year or so. In the meantime, I started, again, because I had time, I started playing around with, what can you do with Photoshop? And, because I've got a bit of an IT bent, it was sort of like something that, rather than a creative thing, it was I like playing on, sitting at a computer.
Yeah, like a graphic thing.
Yeah,
right.
Maybe. And I bought a book by Glyn Dewis, which is one of his Photoshop. He's started off as a Photoshop retoucher, and it was a really good book. He explained it in quite good detail about things you could do, just pasting in stuff and what have you.
Right.
So I played around with that. And then I saw an advert that he was doing a one-day workshop at Petersfield Camera Club.
Yep.
And it was like 20 quid. It was like, that sounds great. I'll come along. I assumed he was just going to do Photoshop retouching. But what he did was he did a full day of portrait workflow. So he went along. He got a couple of interesting looking guys from the audience to act as models. he had lighting set up, took you through what he was doing with a single light setup.
Yeah.
Took Rembrandt style photo, lighting photo, and then took it into Photoshop, and he does some pretty good stuff. Well, I like his style. I thought, this is really good. Maybe portraits would be a good thing to do.
Yep.
So I started to try and take some portraits. Never done anything with models or anything. So it was either finding a friend or a friend of a friend, or going to somewhere where I went down to the Watercress Line, which is, these steam railways. They did a 1940s.
Where they all get dressed up.
Yeah. There's some quite good characters there to try and take some photos and then apply some of the styles that people like Glyn uses. So that was so I've got now 2 areas that I'm sort of following then. I then in 2017 joined the Camera Club, Basingstoke Camera Club.
Sorry to interrupt, but what's the push for you to join that Camera Club?
Well, funny enough, I decided that I probably wanted to join one, and maybe it's a bit weird that there are 2 camera clubs close by. There's Basingstoke Camera Club and there's Overton Camera Club.
Right.
Basingstoke at the time, and I think this is still the case, Basingstoke meet on a Thursday night and Overton meet on a Friday night.
So did you do both?
No.
Oh, because
and they were doing like
two-timer.
Well, they were doing. It was the beginning of September. They were, and they were advertising. I saw the advert somewhere. Maybe it's on the website. Come along. It's our first meeting of the season. Come along, see what we do. Blah blah blah. And I was going to go to both just to measure out. And then it worked out that at the time, I don't know, we were doing something on Friday. So I only went to the Basingstoke one.
Right. And it just carried on.
And it just went on from there.
Yeah.
So I just went along, joined up. And I found it like really useful for me.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I've picked up since I've been at the club is I like doing wildlife photography now.
Right.
Which I hadn't done before. There's a lot of guys, you've seen this, there's a lot of guys that take macro wildlife photography, pictures of butterflies or dragonflies. And when I first went, I thought, these are amazing photographs. I'd really like to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And you can talk to some of the guys at the club and they'll explain where you need to go, when you need to go, what kit you need to do, how you do it. And I've learned stuff from the guys at the club there. And I went out and bought a macro lens because I didn't have one of them. So I did that. And then also the club runs a number of external speaker talks during the year. We have about 8 or 9 external speakers come along during the year. And they've had a couple of wildlife photographers that have come along to there. And that's some of their stuff has been amazing. I mean, some of them do, African safaris, escorted African safaris, which is amazing if you've got like 10, 20 grand to spend. Yeah. But they also do UK ones as well. So I've been on a couple of workshops by a guy called Tom Way, who does wildlife photography.
Yep.
So again, if you like another genre that I've picked up since I've been at the club. So
wildlife to me is very similar to portraiture in how it's interpreted.
Yes.
As much as like the challenge of doing it, it's a very specialized thing. But the interesting thing from spend a lot of time, because I think I don't work very often. For a photographer, I work a lot, but for like the average person, I have a lot of days off. And I find myself trying to view things from a very sort of like external point of view and watch how people interact with stuff. And I find wildlife photography and portrait photography really interesting because they have one similarity, which is that people will judge the quality of an image based on the subject rather than the image.
Yeah.
Like quite often.
Yeah.
So you could have a really good picture of a male subject, and I find there are certain people that will just never give it any credit for being what it is. And there could be a terrible standard female image, and people are like, "Oh, this is the best thing ever." There are certain people that are like, "Oh, it's so beautiful, so wonderful," because of the subject. And the same with the wildlife stuff. I've seen some amazing stuff done with like English wildlife. I know we don't have the most exotic wildlife, but some amazing images in terms of the photography is incredible. And then you'll get someone that will take like a kind of half-assed picture of, I don't know, something in Africa, but because the subject matter is rarer, people will dive on that as being the pinnacle.
It's a lion or whatever. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Not to knock people that go on African safaris. If I could afford it, I'm sure I'd do it. But it's just interesting the way that, especially non-photographers, will receive an image.
Yeah.
And the way that they'll interpret it is like, if something is not something they could find in their garden, it must be a better photo.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, especially if you're trying to almost like, if you're starting to do like close-up headshots of an animal or an insect, you're starting to think about, well, actually, how would I have lit that if it was a, you know, almost like a human portrait?
Yeah.
I've done some stuff with, I've got a little grip that I fit onto my camera with a flash on it. So I've taken this out trying to take pictures of dragonflies and thinking, well, where am I going to get the light right?
Yep.
And it's the same as you would do effectively in a studio, but you know, it's wildlife. But
I think one of the things I did notice with the some of the judgment of the images last night, it was interesting to have, like you were talking about Glyn Dewis, it's interesting to see the front to back. When it's one of your images and you knew what you, like the decisions you made that went into it, it's interesting the way that it's interpreted. And then I started looking at other stuff that was going in, and there was definitely a couple of images that if I was judging, there was one in particular that he really liked. And all I could see was this one issue, which is like a real bugbear for me. Like it's something that just, the second I see it, it irritates me. And he didn't mention it. And I could feel myself like, notice it, notice the problem. And then I was like, why am I bothered?
Yeah.
Like that's I don't know. It's interesting that I think I learned a lot about the judging side of things by my interpretation of how I would judge it, where like, I think this one thing is like the worst possible thing you could do with a photo. And then someone else is just like, yeah, it's not even worth paying attention to.
Yeah.
And you realize that they're the same as you. So they'll have their thing that they can't abide by. I think it was quite funny. He said about, he called the waterfalls.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The slow shutter speed waterfalls a real cliche.
Yeah.
Because like we're gathering a lot of cliches in photography right now. Yeah. There is a lot of cliches in photography. Is there any, okay, so this is just for you personally. Is there any cliches in photography that you're not a fan of that like bug you or?
I don't know. It's as you say, that one with the waterfall can be a bit like that, and also the other one there's a lot that sort of like suddenly pop out these days. Is a waterfall, sort of smoky water, slow shutter speeds are a bit like that as well.
Yeah.
HDR had gone too far, although that seems to have died a death. That was about
2013.
Yeah, everybody wanted to do these really high.
I remember getting an inquiry
really
from
horrible HDR
from a wedding client, a potential wedding client, and they said, "Oh, we really like the way you shoot, but do you ever edit anything HDR?" And I was like what? I'll be honest with you. At that point, I'm just more curious. I'm not going to take the booking because I already know that it's not going to fit. And she's like, oh, you know, pictures of the bride and groom. It's like, you don't want a HDR picture of a bride. Jesus Christ. No one's looking at a bride and they're like, can we get more dynamic range and texture on that?
It's really soft.
I think there's a couple of things I find really personally, if I was to hold my hands up and say this, I would have a prejudice against certain things in photography, like really strong vignettes.
Right.
Where they're really intense. The point to me of a vignette is to kind of ease the viewer into what you want the subject to be.
Yeah.
Like more attention on the subject. What it actually ends up being when you really overdo it, it's just like a really distracting vignette where you're just like, there's a vignette there. I can see a vignette.
Yeah.
It reminds me of those old, like the old, I don't know, like 40s, 50s photos of the white vignette.
Yeah.
It's similar sort of thing to me where it's almost like it's so distracting. But as far as like that, I have one thing which I like. It could be the best picture in the world. I'm not going to like it if it has this, which is when people do portraits in either like graveyards or anything to do with like, I would just call it sexing up death.
Right. Okay.
Because I just think it's really, I don't really know what your message is.
Yeah.
That's always bothered me. I remember I did a shoot when I had only had a camera for about 3 months. And the model wanted us to do something at like a cemetery. And I'm so new to this. I'm just like, it's a model that wants to work for free. Let's do this. So we meet up, we do this shoot. I learned a lot, but I hate the photos. Like I hate them with a passion. And it was actually the cemetery that my granddad's ashes and some of his family are at. Yeah. And I was like, afterwards, I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Yeah. Like I should never have done that. Yeah. And I think ever since then, I've had this like real bias against pictures in graveyards. The worst one I ever saw, sorry to hijack with a story here, but the worst one I ever saw was New York about 3 or 4 years ago, the 9/11 memorial. They've got the fountain. I don't know if you've seen it. It's basically I think it's the foundation of the two towers. They have like a wall running around where the foundation was, and in the middle there's a fountain. And on the wall, it has people's names, like firefighters or people that died on the day. And there was a girl in hot pants, like posing. Yeah. And I have never had such an urge to punch someone in the face.
So disrespectful.
And I was like, I've got to get out of the country though. If this was in England, I'd do it because I thought like I could get away with it. But it was infuriating. And fortunately, New York has got enough aggressive people in it that they stepped in and had a word. But I don't know. It's just so tone deaf.
Yeah.
Right, now that I've completely hijacked it.
No, sorry. I mean, it's, as you say, it's people like trying to come up with I don't know, maybe a different artistic, they call it an artistic bent on something, and it goes the wrong way.
Yeah. I think it's, when I used to play music, there was an interview, and I cannot even remember who this interview was with. It was such a profound quote, it stuck with me, but I can't even remember who it was. And he was asked, what do you do if you if you hit a wrong note on stage? Essentially was the gist of the question. He said, you hit it twice and then people think it was intentional. Yeah. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, you know, you can kind of walk your way out of it as opposed to be like, oh shit, I've made a mistake and put your hands up. You can kind of walk your way back. And I think that's where the problem comes in for me with this kind of thing, is that if you're going to do something that's so tone deaf, at least commit to it. Yeah. Because there's quite a lot of people that will do it. And then when someone kicks off, they're like, oh, I won't do it again.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like a real contradiction in terms of.
I know what you mean.
I just think they should have more conviction. Yeah. So as far as, what do you look for from the Camera Club now? Obviously putting aside your affiliation as the publicity guy, what do you look for personally?
I suppose the things that I'm looking for are ideas and inspiration.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't think I've probably reached, I say, well, I take travel, wildlife, portrait photography. That's not to say next year I think, shit, I should be doing this.
Yeah. There was pictures of people in graveyards now that I've given you the idea. Yeah.
I didn't even thought about that. Yeah. Great. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
But it was like, last year we had a lady called Rachel Talabar. I don't know if you've heard of her. She takes photos of the sea and waves,
right?
In like an artistic way, and the shapes that makes. And it was like, oh, that's quite interesting. Like maybe I'll go down to the beach. There's a place in, I think it's in New Haven. If you get it's got like 2 piers that go out, and the waves hit that. And if you go there during a stormy period, you get some pretty interesting shapes that appear. And that was like, oh, that's quite interesting. There's a guy coming next week. Urban X. Yeah.
I thought it was quite funny. Stuart said that's not his real name.
Really? Yeah. Not that I condone anything, but it sounds like he goes into like, disused buildings. And
I think it's become such a part of the zeitgeist that people just expect abandoned buildings.
Yeah.
I tell you what, it's one of the hardest things to do because we ain't got the space in England for abandoned buildings, really.
No,
so the second something's not used, it's getting knocked down.
Block of flats on top of it.
You've got to be quick. It's not like America, where if you go to the Midwest of America, most of it's abandoned.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, be interesting to see what it comes up with. So there's, I think there's, one of the things is ideas and inspiration for my photography, whether it takes it either improving what I do or going in a different direction, maybe. The other thing is trying to improve my photography through hopefully constructive criticism of what I provide That's the other thing.
Yeah.
And then I suppose the final thing is getting experience from other people within the club.
Yeah.
Now, whether that is some of the guys that have been taking photos for the last 50, 60, 70 years, whatever.
Yeah.
Or if it's, guys like you who obviously have honed your craft in a particular way, which I can learn from as well. So
right.
I think that's the. I mean, there's a social aspect that some people. It's not something that I'm particularly picking up on in terms of what happens at the club, but I know a lot of the people have gained friendships and meet up. There's I don't know if you know, there's a community centre bar that's.
I see people walk in with pints.
Yeah,
I figured out there's a bar somewhere.
Yeah, so there's a bar next door.
Or someone's just got a tap in his car.
I think some of the guys, or the guys and ladies, sorry, go and have a drink before or after or during as well. So you can make a real social thing if you want to.
Yeah,
as well.
I think the one thing I would struggle with, I can't drink, so that doesn't help me too much. But it's one thing that does stand out to me is the age gap.
Yeah,
between myself and a vast majority of the club. Obviously, I'm 31, although I do look about 45 at the moment. I'm feeling it, but there is an age gap, and I made the mistake with my the night we first spoke when I gave my little talk about my milestones in photography, with basically saying I'm not a murderer, although I look like one. And now that must have been brought up to me about 60 times, where people are like, "Oh, you're the one that's not a murderer," and it's got to the point. The problem is I'm so stupid. I say the first thing that comes into my head, and someone said to me this week, someone said, "Oh, you're the not a murderer," and I went, "Yeah." And that's not helping the cause. You're just throwing more kindling on it.
Yeah.
As far as the social aspect goes, I'd quite like to do more with it. I mean, I'm offering. If I can help out in any way, then I'd be more than happy to. Because I think that, like you said earlier, about it being like a community, I'd like to be at least a relatively constructive member of the community if I can be. The point I struggle with, and this is very much me, but interested to hear your sort of take on it. My fear is that I'll end up stepping on toes. It's very hard to put yourself forward to help with something in a group where you have to earn the right to say you could help. I guess that's to where I see it.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's a thing that happens wherever you are in a community, society, club.
Yeah,
I think the club is getting better in terms of trying to address the sort of like the variation of age that we've got in the club. And I think that comes down to clubs in general. The likes of myself, I'm 61, and I've got more time than the guys that are working hard at going out to earn a crust every day. So maybe we've got a bit more time to get involved in these things, and that's what happens with clubs, I think.
So do you think it's the demographic of younger people being less is down to maybe them doing something else with their time? And when you get a bit older, you have that time spare. Is that where you think it comes?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of that. And I think you've got to attract the people, and that's always going to be difficult as well.
Yeah.
As you said, if you go into somewhere where all the people there are my age and older, then are you going to relate to that? But we have to try and break that down and say, well, we don't mind as long as you're effectively you're over 18, because we can't have, I think it's over 16. I think there's some sort of insurance rules below that. So they have to come with their parents if they came along.
Yeah.
But we're happy to have, and I'd be really happy to see a wider age range, because it just brings more into the club.
Do you think there's anything to, obviously we're, 20 years into I guess the beginnings of the transition from film to digital. Do you think that there's anything to like that being a delayed effect as well? Because I see a lot of people there are digital, even though they may be someone who's come from a film background. Everyone I think there is digital.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there's an issue with that, which was something I actually was asked if that was the issue. I don't think.
I don't think it is. I just think it's a generic thing that young, if you're younger working people have got probably a lot more priorities than tipping up and it's also just, what you're going to do. I mean, you could come along and just listen to the speakers. But, if you're going to think about, well, actually, I want to put something in a competition, I better have a think about it. I better do a bit of prep beforehand. It's not just, maybe not just turn up on the night.
Yeah.
And making sure that you can go out and take photos rather than, again, going back to my experience of, I haven't got time to go out all day and take photos of a particular subject where all I've been doing is taking pictures of my kids, or I just get the camera out when I'm on holiday. So I think it's more to do with that. And I think the other thing that we've done is in the club, and they've only done this in the last couple of years, is they've got these special interest groups, because it's such a broad spectrum of things you can take photos of or whatever. Yeah. So, we've started that. We've got a portraits group. We've got a wildlife section. Nature.
Yeah, I think that's what I was told on the induction.
And there's a night photography one as well.
Right.
And people are, if people have got something else that they'd really like to get into, the club would be more than happy to, see how we could work that one. So, you could just, if you wanted to just specialize in one particular area, really like that, you could just go to those.
Yeah. Is the format, you think, with regards to, you have like a general group with special interest sections, almost like subgroups. Do you think that's the best way forward? Because obviously I think what photography has tried to do away from camera clubs is have portrait photographers are portrait photographers, and they hang around with portrait photographers, and there's no mixing. Like, do you think it's beneficial to have a general group and then have
the individual subgroups? I think you're right. And the subgroups they're not part of, we don't turn up on a Thursday and say, well, you're a portrait photographer, you need to go in that room, and that one goes in that room. I mean, because it's all done outside of the
I want you to do that
meetings.
now, though.
Yeah. But, so you'd, again, going back to the portraits one, which is the one that I belong to.
Yeah. That's your gang.
Yeah, my gang. Yeah. We meet up every sort of like 4 to 6 weeks on a Saturday, and we'll do a shoot as such, whatever you want to call it, and then discuss the stuff online after that.
Okay. And is it like you meet up with like a collective idea, you shoot that collective idea, and then there's like a group chat kind of thing, or email chat?
Yeah,
like
that's the plan.
That's the plan.
Never works like that.
Best laid plans.
Yeah. I think it's getting better than it was, because I think the first couple of sessions we just turned up. One of the groups got their own studio in their garden, which is pretty well kitted out, which he very kindly lets out. And we all turned up. We took it in turns to be a model, and we had some sort of vague idea what we were trying to do, but it was a bit hit and miss, and everybody was trying to, I said they were all trying to take photos at the same time, so the triggers were going off all over
Firing
the place.
squad.
Yeah. But I think we're now getting more to a bit more structure to it. So the idea is that we'll come up with 2 or 3 ideas, mainly around lighting.
Yeah.
Post some stuff on Pinterest and say, oh, this looks really good. Maybe we could try and recreate this.
Yeah.
And then if it's in a studio, let one person have a sort of 5-10 minute slot of having a go at it. We'll have a look at their stuff. The next person can have a go.
I think with portraiture is very different from almost any other type of photography. There's a word I'm going to use, but I want to explain it. So don't just take it on the first word I use here. But it's one of the only ones where you're God. A wildlife photography, you turn up and you're interpreting things that happen. Street photography, you're interpreting what happens. Wedding photography, you're interpreting. Almost every type of photography, you are artistically interpreting. That lady that photographs waves, you can't go, look, waves, could you just be like 4 foot higher? You can't do that. You can only sort of predict or make a general prediction or an educated guess based on time of year, previous experience, and so on. You can't actually physically control every aspect. Whereas with portraiture, I think that's where a really good understanding of what you wanted to get from it comes in. I think a lot of people, when I've done workshops and when I've done one-to-one tuitions, in fact, one-to-one tuitions more than anything, I find people don't know what they're trying to get out of the portrait shoot. They just like portraits. And it's important for a couple of things. You have to narrow down what you're trying to get, and you don't want to try and get everything in one sitting. So like I've had people where they want to, they want to learn how to use studio lights, but also in the same process, they want to learn how to use UV lights. They also want to learn how to do long exposures using continuous light and stuff. And it's like, you need to like get one, and then get it so that you can understand it at least, and then move on to the next thing.
Don't try to do it all.
And I guess the other thing with portraiture, so I was given this piece of advice. It's the only time I've ever brought this up. I'm actually quite looking forward to this. So when I first started, I asked a couple of photographers that I admired for advice on shooting portraits. More than, I wasn't asking for feedback because I knew most of my stuff was shocking. All of my stuff was shocking, actually. But I was looking for advice from someone that had kind of walked the path I was looking to go down. And one of these people had told someone they knew that I had asked. And then this other person messaged me at random. And their piece of advice for me was, if you want to be a portrait photographer, the only way you can be good at it is if you are sexually attracted to the subject.
Right.
Which is comfortably the worst advice I've ever heard given. And I was actually only reminded of this recently because this guy has just been kicked off of like every site for loads of horrible indiscretions and disgusting behavior. And it just all come flooding back to me. 2 things he said to me was, one was this thing, like, don't photograph someone unless you're sexually attracted to them. And I thought, well, Jesus Christ, you just ruled out half the population straight off the bat. But the other half of it, he made a comment, and I can't verbatim it. I need to dig this out, but because he's been removed, I can't find this old message, where he basically said he felt like a dad to me in this like initial message. And I didn't know how to reply to that. I come from a background where I just say whatever comes into my head. And I just responded, I've already got a dad, thanks.
Yeah, I don't want another one.
Like, it's just such a weird situation. You got this guy that's like, you have to fancy him, but also I'm your dad. It's one of the weirdest experiences. And I was so new to photography at that point. I was like, is this everybody? Is this what I've got to put up with? All right, so going forward then, one thing I would like to ask is, how do you interpret negative feedback on your work? So you enter something in a competition and you get, because you have to have something negative, it's going to be there, everyone has it. How do you interpret it? Do you take it as you it can't be right, or it has to be right, or is this somewhere in the middle?
I think somewhere in the middle. So especially when I first started putting stuff into competitions, never done it before, and you start to start off with, you make some real gaffes. You put something in, you think, and they say, oh, you've got, I'm not something like ridiculous, like you've left a sensor spot on there, and it's just like, you should have like spotted that before you even thought about it. You go around the whole photograph, and the first one I put in that, and then there are certain things about the composition that, okay. Maybe I've got that wrong. But there are certain ones where you say, I just don't agree with what you're saying. Yeah. That's fine. I'm going to take it on the chin. Otherwise, I shouldn't be entering these things. I'm not going to go and scream and shout at my wife because I only got
that was the first competition I came to. There was a couple that had a row. Like the most whispery row you've ever heard, because of the judge talking about one of the pictures. Yeah. And they obviously didn't agree with what he had said. And it was, I couldn't take my eyes off the row at that point, so I missed like half of the rest of the judging because I was watching them have this like the most English row you've ever seen, where they're like each other.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first year I did, I put a print in, and it wasn't, and the if you like the critique of it, I could understand where he was coming from. It was a rusty old crane against some. It was in a quarry, and the definition, it lost a bit because of the rocks behind.
Yeah,
and I could see where he was saying it was like getting a bit lost. But I think it was the first print he'd done, and I think you've seen it. And again, I'm only speaking from personal experience. This is not anything to do with the club or anything in the way people judge this, but it normally works that when they're doing these things, an average is about an 8.
right.
And then you go up to, top marks are 10, and you go down to 7, 6.5, very rarely below that, that's the way it works. And that's from experience, not from, I don't know if that's the way that they work, but that's what I've seen.
Yeah.
And this guy, and he said, that's a 5. I went, what?
Ooh.
And the rest of the evening, and I don't know whether he just got, he just wasn't thinking about it maybe or not.
Yeah.
But everybody else, the minimum score was like 6.5. Nobody got below that. And it wasn't that bad.
Right.
And I had a bit of a reputation. So there was a guy that used to sit next to me, and he used to come in, he said, "Oh, are you going to get 5 today then?"
So you become the guy with the 5?
Yeah, you're the 5 man.
Right.
Yeah. So that went on for a few months as well. So
that's interesting. The scoring thing confuses all hell out of me. I asked about this on the induction. Because to me, if you're going to have, this is just, again, not the club or anything like that, but my personal opinion, and I have got relatively thick skin, if I've taken a picture that's a 2, I just want to hear that it's a 2.
Yeah.
And I understand that there are people that won't want to hear that.
No, and I think...
But I feel like there could be, I said this to Jamila about, like, the scoring system confuses the fuck out of me because, like... stuff that especially when you mix it with the feedback, there was images on the first night that I saw judging, and the guy was like, wonderful composition, I really like the colors, you've captured a great mood, 7.5. And then like later on in the evening they'd be like, well, you've missed this, I find this distracting, blah blah blah, that's an 8. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is so confusing. Like what is a 7 and what is an 8 and so on.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand why you wouldn't have 1 to 10. My wife said they should work it from an A to an F.
Yeah.
And I was like, I agree, all the way to an F. And then you give someone an F and you wait to hear what they think of you after that.
I think the other thing is, say, again, from personal experience, it's, it's a social club. It's not... this isn't you're taking your A levels, or it's not strictly come dancing or anything. Craig Greville Hall would doing the judging. So and you don't want to completely knock people out by saying, well, that's complete shit.
Yeah.
That's 1. And you think, oh, I'm never going to pick my camera up again. I think you have to take it in context of what we're trying to do. And it's not a big national competition. It's a local community, social thing. So don't knock people because some people have more creative eye or have got more experience than other people.
Well, it's definitely softened off.
Yeah,
like the way the scoring's done is softened off socially.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting to see some people get less than impressed with their marks. And one of the things that was brought up at the induction that I did, and I've heard this since I was a kid with some of my mum's stories, was people would say, well, I'm new to this, and then they'd say, I think this should have got a higher score. And I think you can't be both of those people. Because you have, I can't remember the exact, I'm going to butcher this. I know half of it's Kruger. I think it's like Dixon or Dickinson Kruger theory, which is essentially that it takes as much ability to judge your ability at something as it does to do the thing.
Yeah.
And you can't be both those people.
Yeah.
Like
you'd never have someone give a verdict on themselves in court.
No.
So you're definitely going to be biased in some way.
Yeah.
But one thing that I'm very careful of, and I've been bad in the past, is where I just dismiss something out of hand because I'm just like, well, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But the arrogance of me to say something like that, especially when I was younger, it doesn't carry over particularly well. And then you get into the question of, well, to what end? To what end is only accepting positive feedback useful for anybody?
Yeah. Yeah. Within reason, I suppose, as I say. I mean, when I first went, I suppose I was, go home and I was a bit glum when I got home.
Right.
I said, how did you get on? Oh, you got so-and-so, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Just
don't go home, you just go drinking.
That's right, yeah.
I had about 6 lem sips when I got in last night.
Yeah. So I think, as I said, I always say that, if you're going to get really upset about it, don't do it.
Yeah.
There is they do this sort of social critique as well. I don't know. Do they speak about it on the induction even? Like, there's a lady called Lena that does this, and again, it's a bit more a social thing. I think once a month or so they go.
They go to the Sun Inn.
That's right. You take your photos in, and people chat about them rather than you're not going to get marked on them, but people will give you a critique, and you don't get a mark. You're not going to get upset because there's no mark associated with it. So maybe go down that route if you get too upset about, but you don't like it. But I say just take it on the chin and move on. Go on to the next one.
Yeah, I think sometimes as well you have to think what your target audience is. Where are you headed towards? Like I can think of a dozen fashion photographers that would just get laughed out of camera clubs because they rely on non-technique based things to draw attention to their work.
Yeah.
I mean, Lindsay Adler talked years ago about she basically followed a pattern that she saw in magazines. Like, she wasn't doing this, but she was following how prominent it was that stuff would be badly lit on purpose. Because when you're flipping through the magazine where everything's glossy and perfect and wonderful, you get to the one that isn't and you're like, and you stop on it for longer.
Yeah.
And there's almost something to be said about if everything goes towards a convention, then if you go against that convention, you'll stand out.
Yeah.
And I think in that format, it would make sense. Not necessarily focusing on technique when technique isn't what people are looking at.
And I mean, you know more about this than I do. About there's an actual style that will go through the ages as well in terms of what's the latest thing. Is it a really bleached out photo? Is it a dark moody thing that's what's selling in magazine photos at the moment?
Yeah, I mean Terry Richardson's like, if you put aside the 30,000 cases of sexual whatever he's done, and he's just a real piece of work, it seems. His work is on camera flash, just stark, horrible shadows, but it stands out and it's always famous people, so everyone recognises it.
But if you put that into a camera club competition,
he'd get murdered.
I don't think do too well.
And that's if your idea is to get the same sort of gigs as what Terry Richardson would aim for, and you want that kind of attention and those people that like his stuff to like your stuff, then the camera club's never going to come back and be like, this is good.
No.
I think that's where me putting in, I only wanted to put in one portrait. I'm not going to probably put in another portrait because that's not what I'm there to learn about. But what I learned was the way that one is interpreted. Because it's so stupid. What went into the photo. So the image in question, I can tell you everything. It's like, it was a gridded beauty dish with a sock on it, camera left. The subject's about 2 foot in front of a incredibly poorly folded canvas backdrop, which I'd never fold up properly because I want the texture. It was shot with 180mm macro, at f3.5. I had an ND filter on I remember everything about that shoot. So then when someone interprets it and you think they're going to go through all these layers that you've put into it, but it's not, because that's not how anyone sees a photo.
No.
And that's what's quite difficult, I think, for people to separate is the work that you put in to how it's interpreted.
Yeah.
I need to get out and take some pictures of dragonflies, I think, for sure. That's my next step.
Maybe.
So moving forward, we'll wrap this up in a minute. You can have a cup of tea and relax. And
But moving forwards with the Camera Club, how do you think you get in more people and potentially a younger demographic?
Yeah. Okay. This is something I'm trying to think about, and I don't think I've got an answer to it yet. And so I will ask other people questions about it. I would like to see us getting a younger demographic in, and I had this idea, and it's still formulating whether we could do, as we are a community club as well, whether we could do something with the local education establishments that are in the town. So I know that QMC do A-level photography course. The Tech College, I think, does. I don't think it does photography as a single subject, but they do art foundation courses, and they do fashion courses as well, which involves taking photos of their work as well.
Right.
And whether we could get in touch with them. And I'm not expecting these guys to turn up, I'm not expecting 18-year-old people to sort of like pop up and spend every week with us. They've
got a drink at some point.
Club and what have you. So, but, maybe we could encourage them to do some critique of our work. We do some critique of their work, whether they'd like to do some sort of competition that's via the club.
Yeah.
Just so that we can get some feedback from them and they can get some feedback from us. I don't know. It's and then maybe when they're old and decrepit like me, they'll come along.
I definitely think one suggestion that was brought up, I'm going to get this wrong. I'm almost positive it was Yasmina, who suggested it. If I've got that wrong, I will correct it.
Yeah, I think there's some
Serbian young lady just joined at the same time as me. She suggested just Instagram is a good place to get onto, and I have to agree. It was not something that I thought of.
Yeah,
but it definitely makes sense. That's where people are that are that age. And it could be a thing where there's like work being shown from different members and whatnot. That could be quite an interesting.
The club's got a Flickr account, but I don't think many people use it, and I don't know whether it's very. I find Flickr's quite a technical.
I think you're already in photography when you go to Flickr. I don't like Instagram. You can like pictures without having to understand them, and that's the step in.
And we do have the Facebook account, which is interesting because I assume that the Facebook was just our members, but there's a lot of people that aren't actual members that have joined the thing. I think it may be something to do with the fact that there's a Basingstoke Gazette Camera Club.
Yeah, this was brought up
and
to
everybody joined the wrong club. I don't know.
Not a turf war going on.
Yeah. So I don't know whether it's to do with that, but it's interesting that because one of the things I again try to do is there's an email that goes out to the club members to say what's on this week, but I also put it on Facebook as well because there may be somebody that's not a member that. That speaker sounds interesting. Come along. So we can encourage more people to come along.
I mean, lots of diversity with the speakers this year, I think.
Yeah, there's some good speakers.
The lady a couple of weeks back who did like the sort of impressionistic landscape.
Yeah, I wasn't around for that one, but that was.
It was really interesting. It was fascinating because it felt like without being in any way, this is a genuinely sincere comment. She was so much like my mum.
All right.
Because she talked about Big Brie. My mum's obsessed with Big Brie. She was obsessed with like textures and rust and how it related to the sea, all stuff that my mum was interested in when she was photographing. So to me, I was sat there and I was like, this is so bizarre. It's like, is this my mum? She had a bit of money on the Camera Club circuit. But it was really interesting. And that's one of the things that definitely brought me in was the diversity of speakers.
Yes.
As much as anything. I mean, the first night I came along was a portrait guy who did like
sports
portraits. Not stuff that I would do, but it's always interesting to hear someone's process and how they end up where they end up. It's really cool. The last thing I want to ask you, and I'd actually just thought of this because I don't understand this. The letters after names.
Right.
Is there like, I'm not asking for a really in-depth thing here. I don't want to use like scared.
I wouldn't know anyway. So because I've got no letters after my
all
name.
It is that I know there are some people there with the letters after their names where they belong to like fellowships or whatnot. Yeah. Is there like one overarching one, or is there like different channels for different genres?
Different ones. So I'm no expert in this, but there's the is it the RPC RPS, which is the Royal Photographic Society.
Right.
But there's another one as well, and I can't remember the name of it. Keith, do you know one of the guys that spoke last week?
Yes.
He just got some
I think he's
distinction in.
I think he was like
yeah.
DRPS.
That's another. So there are a number of sort of affiliations that if you want to, if you feel like that's something you want to do to show that you've got, those, you want to have those letters after your name, you can go down that route. I think you have to, you have to submit certain stuff.
Yeah.
You have to hand over your money.
And your soul, and
I don't know if it's your soul, but it's certainly
right. I was thinking Freemasons. It's totally different.
No, I don't think it's anything like that. But I think it's you just have to have a checkbook. I think.
I remember my.
But obviously, you do have to be assessed.
Yeah.
And it's not automatic. So if it's something that you want to do to challenge yourself, it's a good way of doing it, I suppose. I
remember doing bakery at college. So I was working for a few years at a patisserie in Cobham, and I was supposed to go to sixth form and do politics because I'm argumentative, essentially, was all I thought. And had some issues personnel-wise with going back to my old school. And I was like, I need a clean break. I need to go somewhere new. And I was offered really last minute a chance to come in and work while studying bakery, which I'd done for a job through school. And so it's quite cool because you just go in. I just had to prove I could do stuff for like a week, and then the rest of the year I just turned up. I could do whatever I wanted. It was great. But they put me forward for a bursary from the Worshipful Company of Master Bakers, and I remember they were like, they want to have a meeting with you because they want to talk about giving you some money. Yeah. And I was like, do I have to wear like a hood, or do I have to kill a goat, or what's going on here?
Special handshake.
And I remember my lecturer said, you might have to play golf. Oh. And I was like, oh God, it is Freemasons. Anyway, I know this has probably not been the most comfortable thing because it's scary when there's microphones and stuff, but I really appreciate you coming in for this.
Enjoyed it.
Where can people find you for your photographic stuff? Instagram?
Yeah, so I'm in Instagram, Kevin Buckland on Instagram.
Yep.
If they want to know anything about the club, my email address is pubpub_officer@basingstokecamera.club.co.uk.
Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
And say if you're in the area and they're interested, come along.
Definitely.
Yeah, good. Thanks.